Hi, and welcome back to another episode of SEO On-Air. I'm your host, Aaron, and today we have David Palumbo, President and COO of LaunchThat. We talk about how SEO has evolved over time, what the future holds for link building, and the developments in AI and marketing. I hope you enjoy this episode. How long were you into digital marketing and SEO before actually, taking it full-fledged and running things?
Yeah. So right after graduation, or right after graduating college, I'd been doing some manual labor jobs at the time. I was actually landscaping for a while, and knew I needed to get actually use my marketing degree. And I actually started off at a company called NetBiz, and started as a keyword reseller. This was like back in 2011, so like prior to all the knowledge we have nowadays about how digital marketing works. And it was there that I ended up going from sales to account management. And within that, it just kind of led to a passion in SEO. And from that company, I was actually able to move to another company and start an SEO department there. And then eventually that led to the opportunity where I am right now, working for Digital Reach and creating their SEO program here as well. So altogether, I've been in digital marketing now for 13 years, and I'd say about 11 of those are very focused to SEO. The first two were more paid media, actually. I started more in the paid realm, but it was again like back in the day, paid. It's nothing compared to what paid looks like today.
Right. And it kind of
uh,
brings me to the next question, which is since you've been in the industry for that long, what are some of the biggest changes you've seen over time? We can talk about paid first and then get into the SEO side.
yeah. I mean, honestly, the biggest thing is like when I started, it truly felt like the Wild West. Like we had like no real guide. A great
Right.
example was that very first job I had within the industry, working at NetBiz. So I would show up, and this is more on the paid side than SEO, but I would show up and I would get a list of taxi companies, and I would try to sell them the keyword taxi for their area, which just kind of shows you what we didn't know back then. I mean, like everything we
Right.
do nowadays is attribution related. Like, how do we attribute it to what avenue of marketing and where should we be putting our money and how does that all work? And back then it was much more like, you have $100, I can get you 11 clicks for the keyword taxi. Like what? And
Yes.
it was just a very wild west, very I'm gonna say almost looking back at it uneducated,
Right.
and just trying to do whatever we could or whatever we thought worked back then. And looking back at it, I think we'd be pretty embarrassed to be doing some of those things today.
Oh yeah, definitely. I've heard a few people who are like, back in the day, whatever I did was pretty much black hat. And if I did that today, I would not be on this podcast talking to you about it. And I was like, oh, huh, interesting.
So I mean that's very true. Like selling back then was really easy because we were able to kind of like essentially just show up and be like, hey, these practices aren't right. I mean, the amount of websites I saw in the very beginning that had hidden keywords or that had, you know, white text on a white background just to try to fill things in and trick Google. You know, I think the reason that I am still here today is we played best practices, and
Right.
and we knew that eventually Google would catch up to those things. Kind of brings me back. I know I mentioned Matt Cutts to you earlier, but his spam algorithm is kind of like the pinnacle of that era of SEO.
All right. So in this day and age, 2023, what would you say are, let's say, some common mistakes people make when it comes to SEO? And I know I say SEO as like it's such a broad topic, but let's go in particular with on page and off page.
Yeah. So I mean, on the on-page side, I generally like to keep things simple because every site is every site has its own unique issues. But if I had to run down a list of like, hey, these things need to be in there, I'm pretty traditional. So I've been in the industry for a while, and titles and descriptions are still extremely important to me. They're the first thing that Google sees when they hit the page, and then additionally, like it took a long time for the SEO industry to realize that your title and your description are essentially your hook. I mean, that's your advertising right there. So like how do we get a better click-through rate? Well, in organics, that's really all we have to play with to be able to play with the click-through rate. And
Right.
so I still put a pretty heavy emphasis on it. I think it helps a ton with ranking. I also think it helps a ton with getting somebody hooked once they actually hit the SERPs. I'd say impactful headings on your blogs and things like that is definitely another really large item that we go after. A lot, some of our practices are kind of directed towards people also ask or getting into some type of a rich snippet.
Right.
And your blog topics and your headings and how you play those, they play a really big role into what I like to call like a roundabout way of ranking. So instead of directing
Okay.
straight at a keyword, you're going for those rich snippets, or you're going for some type of a snippet within there, or people also ask.
Now, I was going to ask, what are some, let's say, tips and tricks people can pretty much use to kind of work around it, to pretty much create title tags and title headings and whatever they need to do without, let's say, missing a step or missing a beat?
Yeah. I mean, so the lengths are obviously important. I think anybody that's been in the industry has paid attention to the lengths of titles and descriptions. But honestly, um, relevancy and natural speak. Like, don't try to clutter it with keywords. Don't try to like the more natural it is, the easier it is for somebody to read, the more likely they are to click. At least that's what we found over the years. And you see a lot of these titles, like if you go to like Moz and take a look at how they explain how to create a title, I don't believe that that's necessarily the right way. It's not, I think they have it set up to primary keyword, secondary keyword, the vertical bar, and then the branded name.
Right.
I prefer a little bit more of an organic method, if you will, just slightly more natural speak. Like it needs to actually flow. I've noticed that it looks really robotic the way that some of these websites are teaching you, or if you go online and you try to learn about it, it's very much like, hey, this is cut and dry how you do this. But I don't necessarily think that. I think it's much more, can you make it fluid? Yes, you
Right.
want the keywords in there. Yes, you want to get your point across. But a fluid title and a fluid description is always going to be much better than like something that's just a keyword or keyword stuffed for no
Right.
reason. At the end of the day, we're playing organics, and Google likes to see organic writing as well. And I think they like that in content as well as the descriptions and titles.
But when it comes to kind of writing fluid and natural content, do you think maybe tools like ChatGPT or AI in general can pretty much help out? Or
Yeah. I mean, I think I kind of have the same theory around ChatGPT as I do for content when it comes to anything that it writes for us. We definitely use it over here. So for us, like if we were unable to say we're struggling and we're not able to write these, we'll go to ChatGPT, use it as an ideation tool, then still read over the top of it and possibly make some changes at that stage. Yeah,
right.
every now and then ChatGPT nails it. Other times we just need to make a few changes to make sure that it works well. But ChatGPT is a brilliant tool for that. It's definitely a way to save some time.
Technical SEO, I think, has been quite a difficult topic to kind of fully grasp. Not for us
Ooh,
again, more of like,
let's jump back to one thing on the on page for a second.
yeah,
I just want to make sure I mention EAT. So
right.
expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. I think it's like it plays into everything that Google's doing right now. So if you focus on EAT, like you'll run into essentially what the core web vitals are, because it all generates around user experience. And that I can't describe or I can't stress enough how much user experience will improve a website nowadays. So whether
Right.
that's flow on a site or whether that's flow within the content or whatever it might be, if you get to a page and it's all broken up and you're unable to get through it, you're just not going to take the information in that the website's trying to give you. So definitely we live by EAT here and live by user experience. And I think focusing on those items for on page is huge. Like there's nothing better you can focus on than the user experience there. And that
Right.
and I'm not even pinpointing that to a specific type of site. Like yes, obviously e-commerce needs an excellent user experience and a really quick checkout. But even like, for us with our B2B clients, like it's wildly important that we pick up all of those leads. So like how can we get somebody and then have a form fill out happen? And how do we
Right.
make that happen as fast as possible or as effortless as possible by the user? So definitely a heavy stress on that. And then my last item for on page would be implementation. I
Okay.
know it sounds very simple, but high quality implementation as well as just scheduled implementation can go a really long ways in SEO. So I think all too common of a problem that we see is we have a handful of recommendations, but we can get a bottleneck on the implementation. The client doesn't want to deliver there, or we don't have access to the site or something. So implementation, consistent implementation is another high priority of mine.
And I need some help with on-page and off-page optimization. Um, how long would it normally take to kind of plan it out and let them know what exactly the strategy would be?
Yeah. So generally speaking, we'll have a plan within a week or two.
Okay.
We tend to start websites relatively similar. So I know you have a question later on about some technical items. We start with technical. So my theory here is essentially that the technical items are cleaning house. And
Right.
anything that could potentially be creating a manual penalty, whether you have a list of 3404s or whatever it might be to break the user experience, which is going to give you some type of a penalty. Prior to us doing any type of on-page and or like true SEO, where we're playing with content, playing with pages and things like that, we like to clean the entire site first. So any on-site errors that you have, essentially we try to take care of that within the first 3 weeks of any campaign. And
Right.
then we have a touch base about every 6 weeks after that. So we run another report monthly, but then every 6 weeks we say, okay, well, what's on this list? What's potentially holding us back on here? And should we go back in and fix these? Or is it more important for us now to just focus on gaining traction on keywords? And if that's the case, how do we do that? What does that look like? And what's the strategy for the given list of keywords that we have?
Right. And this is kind of done at Digital Reach Agency, right?
Correct. Yeah. So Digital Reach we're a full service agency, and I happen to head I'm the director of SEO, so I head the SEO efforts, and yeah, there's anything within digital marketing we cover, whether it's marketing automation, design, web dev. We have an excellent paid team, but
Right.
yeah, kind of full service digital agency here.
And to kind of quickly round out this subtle shout out, who exactly would your clients be for Digital Reach? And then maybe if they're listening to this, they can probably reach out to you for any help.
Yeah, so like essentially our we have two sets of kind of ideal clients. The first set would be startups. We Digital Reach started in San Francisco, and with us starting there, tech startups are kind of our bread and butter. It's what we've done best on. Additionally, we also have kind of broken into enterprise B2B and have clients on that side as well. Generally speaking, we only play with B2B nowadays. We did do e-commerce and we did do kind of everything back in the day, but we've niched down to specifically create a product for B2B companies.
But how exactly does technical SEO help out with search engine visibility? And is it really that important to have?
Yeah, so I've spent years trying to figure out exactly what the impact of some of these items are on the technical side. So, whether that's duplicate content or broken links or 404s or maybe you don't have your structured data set up correctly. There we could talk about each one of these independently and how they potentially could impact. Um, the general theory we have is just keep it clean, because we
Right.
aren't necessarily able to attribute like this one 404 is costing us X amount of traffic. There's no one-to-one correlation there. And so because of that, just kind of generally holding best practices and doing the best that you can within those best practices is something, that I would definitely push forward on. I also think
Right.
that I also think that each issue doesn't hold the same weight. So, like if you have 50 404s in front of you that need to be fixed, and you have um, 50 alt image descriptions and titles to write, which one's more important at that stage? The 404s are
Right.
probably going to have a bigger impact. So, it's difficult to talk about it because especially when we have like a campaign and a limited number of hours, we are selecting these items as to what's most important and what's the priority list, what needs to be done next,
Right.
what's going to have the biggest impact. That's a cliche saying, but like, low hanging fruit. Where's the low hanging
Right.
fruit and how do we attack that best? So yes, we do have an understanding of like which ones are more important than others, and we tend to prioritize them that way. But I think in general, when it comes to technical issues, just like as I mentioned earlier, keeping a clean house. You want a
Right.
clean house to make sure that it doesn't clutter any of your other efforts.
This might be something that I don't know if you'll be able to answer off the top of your head, but can you maybe list out the priority list?
I don't have it off the top of my head.
No worries.
I have I have a few things in front of me that I know I pay attention to essentially on every single site. The
Okay.
user experience, I know I've mentioned that a bunch, but pretty much ever since Core Web Vitals came out, like user experience is top of the list.
Right.
Site speed, which goes hand in hand with Core Web Vitals as well. Yes, they're slightly different, but they're essentially the same thing. Like we don't ever fix
Right.
Core Web Vitals without fixing site speed and vice versa.
Right.
Crawlability, you'd be shocked to see how many websites we run into where they just don't have crawlability. The ability for the search engines to crawl them just isn't there. Whether that's through a sitemap, whether they messed up on their robots.txt file and like blocked half the site out for some reason. It's relatively so like these are kind of like the entry level. Like what are we looking at to see where they're at?
Right.
404s, I mentioned structured data and duplicate content. If it's an international site, like do they have href lang tags? Is it set up correctly for international, and so on. So I don't have a true priority list because we kind of make them
Right.
based on the campaign, and everybody has their own issues, and then we kind of fit it from there.
All right.
But I will say SEMrush actually does a really good job of prioritizing them. If you take a look at within a SEMrush crawl, what do they do? Warnings, notices, or issues, warnings, and notices. I believe is what it
Yeah.
is, and that's kind of a good way to follow it. If you had to kind of place a rule on it, their issues are going to be your biggest impacts. Their warnings are items that might make a difference but probably aren't negatively affecting you. Uh, and then notices are kind of like we tend to leave those alone because there's a eventually you hit a point of diminishing returns. And
Right.
so is it worth putting the time in for what you're going to get back out? And that's always something that we have to play with. So like is it better to put our time elsewhere and optimize a page, or is it better to fix some small end question or some small end error that potentially isn't necessarily benefiting or taking away from anything that we're doing?
Right. And like you said, it kind of depends on what campaign you are running at that time or who you're actually working with.
Yeah. It's very site specific. Like, and different types of sites have different consistent issues as well. So you have to
Right.
learn what that site generally is pumping out, and then from there create a plan for that.
But like SEMrush, are there any, let's say, tools that you kind of consider very handy?
Yeah, I probably couldn't live without Screaming Frog. And we utilize so we actually do 3 crawls here for any site that we have. So we use SEMrush, Screaming Frog, and then SE Ranking is our keyword ranking tool, and we'll run a crawl in there as well. And we essentially cross verify the crawls. So yes, they don't all 3 crawl the same. So
Right.
if you do a crawl in all three of them, you'll actually find discrepancies between those reports. I will say Screaming Frog, the reason that we love it so much is it is hands down the deepest crawl that we can find.
Uh-huh.
Maybe not as user friendly as the rest. You kind of have to know how to play with the data that you get out of it. Whereas the other items like a SEMrush or like an SE ranking, the crawls that we get from there are relatively easy to show a client and create a story.
Uh-huh.
Whereas you do a crawl in Screaming Frog and it's like, hey, here's a spreadsheet of a lot of information that I'm not sure you can actually decipher. So so it's
Yeah.
yeah, that's I'd say or Screaming Frog is more our internal tool. A majority of what we do externally is going to be in SEMrush. And either we have our own reports for that, or if we're in a sales process, we'll white label a Screaming Frog or sorry, a SEMrush report.
All right. So I'll kind of segue into then the AI tools because we were talking about tools. I'll just try to make it connect that way.
Yeah.
But speaking of tools, how have you been finding ChatGPT and other AI tools when it comes to, let's say, your SEO practices?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, we found a really big benefit in using ChatGPT. We use it. I'd mentioned earlier on in the podcast that like we essentially use it as an ideation tool. So there's a handful of ways that we could use it. We could use it to start keyword research. We could use it to actually one of the biggest ways that we do use it is for topics for blogs
Right.
or honestly it's pretty good as well at finding gaps in content. So if you can feed it, the big thing with ChatGPT is there is a learning curve to it and you have to know how to ask the
Right.
questions. So, we can essentially feed it, hey, look at this website. These are its competitors, and you can ask it to essentially do a content gap analysis for you and come up with topics out of that. And some of those things we used to do very manually. And I'm not going to say ChatGPT is perfect. There's still the human element that has to go in there, and it does miss some items. So we're still
Right.
doing our own manual scraping as well. But if you ever have any type of a block, which absolutely happens to all of us, you're unable to find what you're doing next. We have found ChatGPT to be the best kind of kickstart tool. So like how do I get into the next thing? What is it that we're focused on? And sometimes you can just stare at the wall when you've been staring at the same website for 6 months, and you don't necessarily always know what the best next move is because you're just playing the same things over and over that you've been doing. And ChatGPT allows us to kind of think outside the box, or something that we wouldn't necessarily just like naturally roll into. Whether
Right.
that's through content ideation or whether that's through finding keywords that are on competitor sites. So it's I'd say it's a very powerful tool. But again, it's down to the user on the tool. So how good are you at using ChatGPT is kind of what it's going to kick back out to you.
Yeah.
It is a there's machine learning happening within there, and if you create a thread and build off of that one thread for a client, it actually it actually gets much meatier as the conversation goes on, as
Yeah.
opposed to just popping in one question and expecting something to come up.
Yeah, I think the first few months of us using it as well, we were pretty much just like write XYZ content or
Yeah.
give me this as my content in general. And then we were told pretty much by the same thing that you kind of said, which was if you put in garbage, you're going to get back garbage. So we put
Yeah.
in more time into actually putting up the prompts, asking it multiple times, do you understand what I'm talking about? And then get
Yep.
to the next prompt and move on.
Yeah.
But in
Yeah,
that
and
respect,
keeping it in flow, like at the end of the day, it is a conversational tool, and
right.
it does best in conversation. It
Yeah,
and if you just ask it a question and it answers the question, that's not much of a conversation.
right.
So keep the
Yeah, we've
conversation going with it. You'll get a lot more out of it.
But then when let's say you, me, and multitude of other people are using ChatGPT and we are adding, let's say, that human value to give it that experience, how will search engines react to it?
Yeah, that's that's something I think about almost daily now. The my kind of broad answer towards this is we don't really know what the search engines are going to do right now. Like Bing
Right.
is playing its fun games right now with ChatGPT 4. And honestly, I truly believe that if it wasn't Bing, like if Google was trying to do what Bing was doing, Google would get in trouble. And Bing's kind of able to take a little bit more of a risk with what they're doing, and
Right.
that's why Google looks like they're a little bit behind with BART. But it'll be interesting to see what happens. I've played around a lot with Bing at this stage, and that conversational piece holds really true.
Right.
It's a very good conversational, or very good at kind of being in the conversation. What I'm waiting to see, and I've started seeing it now on Bing, but is how are they going to cite everything? So
Right.
if it answers you, eventually for the search engines to continue to work well, we're going to need to know where these answers came from. So what websites did it scrape and how does that work? And Bing has started doing this. There's a little string at the bottom that shows
Yeah.
kind of the websites it's pulled from to be able to generate the answer. Um, I I think the first step will be that will be kind of how it works. I also
Okay.
think what Bing is doing, like we're going to have this crossover period where we have what we know is the traditional search bar. And then, within Bing right now, they have the chat section too.
Right.
So I think we're probably in the next few years going into a crossover where it's going to be both. And I think the search engines right now are probably the focus for them is probably more on that conversational piece. There's a ton that needs to happen within voice there. So whether
Right.
you're talking to your Google Home or whatever it might be, like right now, there's a big push for that to kind of develop. You can see Google's got crazy things going on with their like Google Assistant and a handful of other items there too. And I think the push
Okay.
is more there in understanding that right now because we still don't necessarily know what is going to happen with the search engines and AI. And I think that's kind of the I know that's not much of an answer, but that's kind of where I sit at this stage is keep your ear to the ground and see what happens next.
Yeah, and to be very honest, I think that is the realest answer we can get because, again, not a lot
Yeah.
of people actually know what's going on with search engines or their take on AI at least.
hmm
Google, I think, gave like a little snippet with their search generative experience, but then I think that raised more questions than answered anything. Um,
there's a big moral issue within the AI item as well, and
that too.
what's going to happen with that? Is there regulation coming? What does
Will
it look
government
like?
start
And
stepping
and
in?
exactly. I mean, uh, I'm also a crypto guy, and look at what's happening there right now. So
Yeah,
at some stage, we've already had issues with AI. I think the biggest one, or like the most public one, would be for images. Getty's got their watermark all over these new AI image pieces of software because they're just taking images online and manipulating them so you can see like a stretched Getty image logo in the corner or something like that. So like,
right.
how far does this go before, you know, too
Skynet.
many too many lawsuits happen?
All right. Okay, mine was a bit
And
extreme.
what's up?
I said I think mine was a bit extreme, but lawsuits, yes, that's what we meant.
Yes, yeah, yeah. So what's going to happen, and how does this actually play in? I'd mentioned in the beginning when I started working in SEO and in digital marketing, we were in the Wild West. We're in AI's Wild West right now,
Yeah,
and it's impossible to predict. And we don't know if it's all going to blow up in the next 6 months or if it's going to take 10 years. And and both of those options are possible. So
yeah,
it's just really staying close to the situation and understanding where it could go at any given day. I think you said it in the beginning of the call. Uh, you know, you think you know something about AI, and then you wake up the next day
next
and it's all
day,
changed.
right? So I
Yeah.
think we can skip that question on what your predictions for the future of AI would be. And I will probably ask a more, let's say, something with your experience in it. What are some of the challenges that you've seen using AI and ChatGPT?
Yeah. So I mean, the biggest challenge that we've dealt with is AI generated content. So we personally don't use any AI generated content. As for the furthest extent that we go is going to be by we essentially have it write content outlines for us,
All right.
but then the writing is still done by a person. Where the big issue is we've done some testing ourselves on just direct AI generated content to see whether or not we can get it ranked. As of right now, I do not believe it's a good option. And we have our own testing behind that to show that it's not that great of an option, as well as I've seen other people run some relatively large tests. One was a full website that was built by AI, and it was unable to attain any ranking. So whatever Google has at the moment, their spam algorithm is somewhat catching what's happening here. Now, can AI get smarter than Google? I believe that, and vice versa. But we don't necessarily know who's going to win. So if AI
Right.
wins, then AI generated content might be a great idea. As it sits right now, I don't believe it's a great option. So I think that's the biggest issue we've had with AI right now is
All right.
in the industry, a lot of AI generated content is being used. Um, Now, this could be a similar thing to what happened with links back in the day when there was like huge link farming and all of that happening. You know, at the time, it was kind of this like gray hat practice. It wasn't necessarily fully white or black. And
Right.
and I think we're there right now. It's you're playing with fire if you're using AI generated content because if Google goes and truly catches it all, uh, you're just going to damage yourself in the long run. So I think
Yeah.
it kind of holds true to the way SEO's always played, which is follow the best practices. Don't try to win in a small amount of time because it just doesn't work with SEO.
Right.
And you're just remember you're playing the long game. So if you need a win today, by all means, go to paid media. It is the best way to win today. But don't cut corners on SEO. At some stage, it will come back to bite you.
Yeah, I was going to say, don't cut corners, and if you want an easy win, pretty much reach out to Digital Reach Agency or Stan Ventures. Another plug.
That's yes.
But
Always
yeah,
happy to help.
what are three, let's say, sources that you can get a good amount of SEO and digital marketing knowledge?
Yeah. So I will say Google itself is a very good place to live. They have their podcasts and their like SEO hour, which is extremely good. If you want to stay up on exactly what they're doing, sometimes they go really in depth, and it's even deeper than you've probably thought. Additionally, any of the big publications online, I check them almost daily. Search Engine Journal, Search Engine Land, things like that. They're just pumping out any of the latest news, and sticking up with that latest news is also good.
Right.
Myself, I'd mentioned a few people that I've followed over the years, as well as what I do today. Matt Cutts is he is the pinnacle of why I still do SEO. Him and his work on Google Spam was absolutely incredible. I wish he never took his hiatus and or just didn't disappear. And then, while following him, Neil Patel and Rand Fishkin, also just massive industry leaders. They've following anything that they've touched is a good way to stay up with SEO. And then I myself, we here at Digital Reach, we do our own research, whether that's testing that we do or whether that's just getting together and reading about other or chatting about other publications that are out there. And Tyler French, who's like my right hand man here at Digital Reach, the two of us get together and just kind of hash out any new concepts that are out there. I highly
Right.
encourage talking to other SEOs. It's about the best way to do it. Even if someone's just playing devil's advocate, the conversation itself might lead to something that could help you out in the long run.
Thanks so much for the chat, Ralph. It's been great.
Awesome.
Thanks for watching that episode. I hope you enjoyed. For more videos like this, make sure you like and subscribe.